Sign it, my mother said. Just sign it, and we can all move on. I smiled, picked up the pen, and signed. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that there was nothing left to sign away. I have been the responsible one my entire life. Not because anyone asked me to be. Not because I wanted to be. It happened the way most things happen in a family like mine, quietly, without ceremony. And before I was old enough to understand what I was agreeing to, my grandmother called me her little anchor. She meant it as a compliment. I was 7 years old the first time she said it, and I remember feeling proud, standing a little straighter in my Sunday shoes. It took me another 20 years to understand that an anchor doesn't go anywhere. An anchor holds everything else in place while the current carries everyone else forward. My sister was 4 years younger than me, and had my mother's eyes and my mother's talent for walking into a room and making everyone in it feel like they had been waiting for her specifically. She had changed her major 3 times in college, dropped out twice, moved back home at 22 with a boyfriend my parents paid to disappear, and had been figuring things out ever since. She was 26 the year any of this happened. I was 30. I had a job. A real one. The kind with a salary and benefits, and a retirement account I actually contributed to. I was a paralegal at a mid-size firm downtown, and I had been there for 6 years, long enough to know more about estate law than most people learn in a lifetime of reading. I knew what a deed transfer looked like. I knew what a quitclaim form meant. I knew how long probate took and how to speed it up and how to slow it down, and, more importantly, I knew exactly how my grandmother's estate was structured, because I had been the one sitting beside her at the attorney's office, handing her water when her hands shook, reading the documents aloud when her eyes were tired. My mother was not there for those appointments. My sister had never heard the word probate in her life. My grandmother died on a Tuesday in October. She left behind a paid-off house in a good neighborhood, a savings account with a balance that would have surprised most people who knew her, a small collection of antique jewelry, and a handwritten letter that she had asked her attorney to read aloud at the formal reading of the will. In the letter, she said she loved everyone equally. She said family was everything, and then she left the house, the savings, and the jewelry to me. Not equally, not split. To me, she had told me in advance, 6 months before she died, when she was still well enough to sit at her kitchen table and drink actual coffee. She had reached across and covered my hand with hers and said, very simply, I know you'll know what to do with it. I had cried. I am not ashamed of that. I cried and told her I didn't need it, and she had laughed. That dry sound she made when she thought someone was being deliberately obtuse. It's not about needing it, she had said. It's about knowing who keeps a promise. I had kept every promise I ever made to her. I had driven her to chemotherapy 17 times. I had sorted her medications and called her doctor and argued with her insurance company on hold for a collective 9 hours across 6 different phone calls. I had been the one to call the funeral home. My mother had sent flowers to the service that were frankly too large for the space. The reading of the will was 3 weeks after the funeral. My mother sat beside my sister in matching black blazers, which I noticed because it meant they had coordinated beforehand, which meant they had talked about this, which meant they had expectations. When the attorney finished reading, the room was very quiet. My mother's face did not move. She had a particular stillness she used when she was calculating, like a phone screen that has gone dark but is still processing in the background. My sister said, out loud, in an attorney's office, "That doesn't seem fair." Nobody responded to that. On the drive home, we had arrived separately and left separately. My mother called me, before I had even reached the highway. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. I let it go to voicemail. The third time, I answered. "We need to talk about your grandmother's wishes," she said. "Not grandma. Not the will. Your grandmother's wishes." Like it was a matter of interpretation. "Of course," I said. "Come by on Sunday." I hung up and called my attorney before I had finished merging onto the freeway. I should explain something about the house. It was not just a house. It was the house my grandmother had lived in for 41 years. It was the house my mother had grown up in. It was 3 bedrooms, a sunroom that faced east, a kitchen with original tile that had somehow become fashionable again, and a backyard with a fig tree that my grandmother had planted herself in 1987. It was also, by current market estimates, worth $412,000. My mother and my sister arrived on Sunday with a casserole dish and prepared expressions of concern. My sister had brought her boyfriend, who I will call simply her boyfriend because he does not deserve more description than that. He sat on my couch and scrolled his phone for the entire conversation. My mother set the casserole on my kitchen counter and then sat down at my table with the posture of someone who had rehearsed this. "We've been thinking," she said, "about Grandma's house." "I imagine so," I said. "It's a family home," she said. "It should stay in the family." "It is staying in the family," I said. "It's mine." My sister made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "You're being selfish." I poured myself a glass of water. I offered one to my mother. I did not offer one to my sister. "Grandma chose who she left things to," I said. "That's her right." "She was sick," my mother said, and her voice had softened in that specific way that meant she was preparing to say something that required softening first. She wasn't thinking clearly at the end. "You were there, influencing her." That word, Influencing. I had heard it before, in other contexts, in case notes and depositions and letters from opposing counsel. I knew exactly what that word meant when it appeared in a conversation about a deceased person's estate. It meant they were building toward something. You should talk to my attorney, I said. Her number is on my fridge. My mother blinked. That was not the response she had prepared for. We're not trying to make this legal, she said quickly. We're family. We thought maybe you could add your sister to the deed. Or we could sell the house and split the proceeds. The three of us. My sister had put down her phone. Her boyfriend had put down his phone. Everyone was looking at me. I thought about my grandmother's kitchen table. I thought about 9 hours on hold. I thought about the fig tree. I'll think about it, I said. I had already thought about it. I had been thinking about it since 6 months before my grandmother died. Since the morning she covered my hand with hers and told me I knew what to do. I knew exactly what to do. 2 weeks after that Sunday, my mother called to ask if I had made any decisions. I told her I was still thinking. She said she hoped I understood how important this was to the family. I said I did. She said my sister was really struggling. I said I was sorry to hear that. She said she thought we should all meet at the house together. To talk about it in the right environment. I said that sounded fine. What I did not say was that the house was no longer in my name. 11 days after the will was read, 9 days before my mother called to schedule that visit, I had transferred the property into a revocable living trust. My name was the trustee. The beneficiary was a nonprofit I had researched and admired for 2 years, the kind that builds transitional housing for women leaving domestic situations. The transfer was legal, clean, and recorded at the county clerk's office by 3:15 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. The savings account had been moved the same week, redistributed across 2 accounts at a credit union my mother had never heard of. The jewelry had been photographed, appraised, and placed with a licensed estate storage facility under my name only. I did all of this quietly, the way I do most things. I did not post about it. I did not tell anyone. I went to work, came home, made dinner, called my grandmother's attorney once to confirm the paperwork, and then went to bed and slept better than I had in months. The visit to the house was on a Saturday morning. I arrived first because I still had a key, the original, brass, slightly worn on the bow from decades of use. I stood in the sunroom for a few minutes by myself. The light came in at that low October angle that made everything look like a photograph of itself. My mother and sister arrived 20 minutes later. My mother walked through every room the way buyers do at an open house, trailing her fingers along door frames. We could get $400 for this easy, my sister said to her boyfriend, who nodded like someone who had not been told to nod. $412, actually, I said. That's the current appraisal. My mother turned around. So you've had it appraised? Of course, I said. Then you're ready to discuss selling? I'm ready to discuss your offer, I said. I thought that's why we were here. My mother looked at my sister. Something passed between them. Then my mother reached into her bag and produced a document. I recognized the form immediately. It was a quitclaim deed. Printed from a legal template website I could tell by the font and the generic header, and filled in by hand in my mother's neat, careful cursive. It had my name on it as grantor. My sister's name as grantee. A transfer price of $1. My mother set it on the kitchen counter, and placed a pen on top of it. Sign it, she said. Just sign it, and we can all move on. I looked at the document for a moment. I looked at my mother's face, which was doing that careful stillness again. I looked at my sister, who was trying to appear indifferent, and failing. I looked at the boyfriend, who had the sense to be studying the ceiling. I picked up the pen. I signed my name on the line. My mother's shoulders dropped half an inch. My sister exhaled audibly. Thank you, my mother said, and she reached for the document. You'll want to have that recorded, I said pleasantly. County clerk's office, downtown. $42 filing fee. We know how it works, my sister said. I'm sure you do, I said. I left the house before they did. I drove home, made coffee, and read a book for the rest of the afternoon. I heard from my sister first, 9 days later. Not a call, a text, all lowercase, which was how she communicated when she was trying to appear casual, about something she was not casual about at all. Hey, so the clerk's office said there's an issue with the deed. Can you call me? I waited 2 hours before responding. What kind of issue? They said the property isn't in your name? Like it's in a trust or something. Can you explain that? I typed and deleted 3 different responses. Then I typed the true one. That's correct. I transferred the property to a trust before the deed you have was signed. The quitclaim you filed is for a property I don't legally own. It can't transfer what I no longer hold. There was a long pause. I could imagine her reading it twice, sending it to my mother, both of them reading it again. So you tricked us. I considered that word. Tricked. I thought about the 9 hours on hold. I thought about influencing. I thought about a quitclaim deed printed from a template website and placed in front of me in my grandmother's kitchen. You handed me a document to sign in bad faith. I wrote back. I signed it. The signature is real. The problem is that I had nothing to give you, and I knew that before I walked in. My phone rang 40 seconds later. It was my mother. I let it ring. It rang again. And again. On the fourth call, I answered. What did you do? It was not a question. It was the tone she used when my sister broke something as a child and she needed to locate the damage before she could respond to it. I protected an asset that was legally mine, I said. You deceived us. You brought a quitclaim deed to a family meeting, I said. Printed from the internet. With my name on it. For $1. Silence. That house belongs to this family, she said finally. Grandma decided what belonged to this family, I said. She had that right. Her attorney confirmed the trust is valid. The transfer was recorded before your deed was filed, and there is nothing to contest. I had an estate attorney review everything last month. You planned this. Her voice had changed. The calculation was gone. There was something rawer underneath it, something that in another context I might have called hurt. I planned to protect what Grandma gave me, I said. Yes. You could have just talked to us. You could have just said no. I thought about Sunday mornings and casserole dishes and coordinated black blazers. I thought about the word influencing. I thought about my sister saying that doesn't seem fair in an attorney's office before anyone had even finished speaking. I did say no, I said. 3 times. You brought a legal document to override it. She started to say something and then stopped. I heard her breathing. The savings account, she said. Is that gone too? It's mine, I said. Yes. Another silence. Longer this time. Your grandmother would be disappointed in you, she said. I have turned that sentence over in my mind many times since then. The way you press on a bruise to understand its edges. There are moments, usually late at night, when it lands harder than I expect it to. My grandmother was not a perfect woman. She was sharp and occasionally withholding, and she had her own complicated history with my mother that I was never fully inside of. But she had looked across a kitchen table and told me she knew I would know what to do. I don't think she would, I said. I heard my mother make a sound that was not quite crying. I stayed on the line for another moment. I'm not trying to punish anyone, I said. I'm not angry. I just stopped being available for something that was never fair to begin with. She hung up. My sister sent 3 more texts over the following week, escalating in tone. The last one accused me of being jealous of her whole life, which I found more clarifying than upsetting. Her boyfriend posted something vague about fake family on social media, which I saw because a mutual acquaintance screenshotted it for me, and which I did not respond to. My mother did not contact me for 6 weeks. When she finally did, it was a real call, no performance in it. She asked if we could have coffee. I said yes, because I am not interested in permanent estrangement, and never was. I met her at a place near my office, a small spot with good light and mediocre pastries, and she looked tired in a way I had not seen before. She asked me, directly, what the trust meant for the house going forward. I explained it clearly. The property would be held in trust for a defined period. I had named myself as trustee, with full management rights. I could live in it, rent it, or sell it, with proceeds directed according to the trust terms. My mother and my sister had no legal standing in relation to it. She nodded slowly. And the jewelry, she said. Also protected, I said. Your grandmother's rings, she said. Not accusatory, almost to herself. I have them, I said. They're safe. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I want you to know, she said, and then stopped. Tried again. I want you to know that I didn't realize I thought your sister. I know what you thought, I said. She's struggling, she said. She really is. I know, I said. I'm not responsible for that. That was the hardest sentence I have ever said to my mother. Not because it was cruel. Because it was true, and I had never been allowed to say it before. She absorbed it the way you absorb cold water, a full-body response, a moment of adjustment, and then a kind of settling. No, she said quietly. I suppose you're not. We finished our coffee. We talked about other things. She told me about a neighbor's renovation project, and I told her about a case at work, and we parted in the parking lot with a hug that was brief and real. She has not asked about the house again. I moved into my grandmother's house in March. I repainted the sunroom, a color called dusty sage that I know my grandmother would have called swamp and then admitted she liked. The fig tree survived the winter and is doing better than expected. I have her kitchen table in the same spot where she always kept it, facing the window over the backyard. I sit there in the mornings with my coffee and I think about what it cost to become the person who could do what I did. Not the legal part. The legal part was easy. I do that for a living. I mean the part where I stood in a room with my family and signed a document I knew meant nothing, and felt nothing except a quiet, steady certainty. I used to think being the anchor meant I was stuck, that I held position while everyone else moved. I understand now that I was not an anchor. I was the foundation, and a foundation does not move because someone asks it to. My sister called me last month. She was upset about something unrelated to any of this, a falling out with a friend, and she needed someone to talk to. I listened. I did not remind her of anything. I did not keep score. When she hung up, she said, "Thanks. You're always there." "I know," I said. I meant it as a fact, not a favor. My grandmother knew the difference between those things. She spent 41 years in that house figuring it out. I have the rest of my life to keep learning it. The fig tree should produce fruit by August. I already know who I'm not inviting to help me pick it.